Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to our Pest Control Town Hall on Acquisitions with Bob Williamson and CETANE Associates. CETANE is a leading provider of financial advisory services to business owners in the home services industries. Bob will answer your questions about the landscape of acquisition in today's pest control space. For more than 35 years, Bob worked with a mid-Atlantic residential service provider. His experience as a PCO and former buyer offers a unique perspective. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and special thanks to everyone who pre-submitted questions. Throughout the webinar, please feel free to use the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to get to those questions as well. With that, I'd like to introduce Bob Williamson, who is CETANE's Pest and Lawn Director. He has handled over 40 acquisitions in his career and visited many diverse service companies across the country, sharing ideas that can help companies grow and prosper. The list of services Bob managed includes pest control, pool, lawn and tree care, home security, delivered fuels, and HVAC. Bob has a Bachelor of Science in Agronomy from Penn State University and an MBA from LaSalle University. He serves on the Pennsylvania Pesticide Advisory Board, is former president of the Lawn Care Association of Pennsylvania, and is former president of the Warrington, Pennsylvania Rotary Club. Bob, let's jump right into the first question. And we've got, what are the characteristics that add value to a startup in the context of pest control?
The key, when you're starting a business, the key characteristics that really add value from the get-go is to focus on renewable services and programs for your customers. So it's very important that when you have an opportunity to sell a service, that you focus on making sure that you really promote a program sale versus a once and done. There are cases where once and done may be your only option, like a bee's nest. They can be hard to convert. But the majority of what you're going out on really should be on some kind of program, because you're not going to keep it away forever, and the customer is going to be happier, and the value of your business is very largely based on your renewable service percentage.
Great.
I would also add one other thing. Pricing is your other key, is to make sure that you're charging a premium price for your service and not to feel like you have to be the low-cost competitor. Because most consumers, when they call, if you meet their needs on the first phone call and you book the call, the price is going to be largely a non-factor. And the person that's going to call around and get 5 prices probably isn't a customer you're going to get anyway. So whatever you do, don't price too low, because that will really reduce your value over time. It's really hard to catch up on low pricing.
Absolutely. Bob, once a letter of intent to buy the business is offered, how long does it normally take to get to a closing?
It can take, Barrett, once the letter of intent is signed and the basic general terms are agreed upon, it can take anywhere from 4 to 10 weeks. 4 weeks being extremely fast, but 10 weeks being a probably more appropriate time frame to go through due diligence and satisfy all the different parameters of the letter of intent.
And, there's a lot involved with due diligence, Bob. What would you say are some of the kind of sticking points when going through due diligence, and what are those key items that you need to have in order to get through that process?
Great question. The largest part in the pest control business, due diligence, is going to be your customer base. And the more organized you are with how you run your business and how you service your customers, whatever software platform you're using, if you're even using one, but the more organized you are with that service, and the more clean your records are for how you do it, how you schedule, how people pay, when they pay, how you track all that, and the information you have, the emails you have, the phone numbers you have, and the cleanliness of your records are really going to be the really key component of due diligence. The vehicles, the inventory, the rest of that stuff is relatively simple and straightforward, and it's no different than any other business. But the customers and how you do it, and I'm not saying if you're small you need to be on a sophisticated software. You just have to be really organized, and there's some really good softwares that help you do that. But even if you don't, I have bought many companies that were running on index cards that were extremely well organized. So even though we had to do it manually, it was relatively simple because we knew where the information was and we could find it.
That's great. So Bob, how many years of revenue are companies usually looking at historically when valuing a company?
The rule of thumb for revenue would be 3 years would be a good track record. 5 is nice, but we're going to really, if the buyer, having been a buyer for most of my career, you really want to see a 3-year track record. And the ideal story to tell with that 3-year revenue curve is consistent growth every year. 15%, 10%, 9%, something that looks consistent that you're investing and growing your business. If the numbers vary, there's going to be a story that you're going to need to tell to say why your business doubled in size in 1 year. That's going to be important. And there may be a story to tell that, but you just need to understand what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think we see this a lot as well, as there's a lot of people looking at all the historicals, but a lot of what have you done for me lately? And what is that most recent year as well, is kind of key.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, we want to see a trend in the right direction, and the buyer's going to want to look at your recent year and see how you're performed and what, again, where your revenues are coming from and how you've managed your business operation wise in that last year. When the value of your business, if you're not attentive to it, will drop relatively quickly. And as a buyer, it's not really that difficult as a buyer to pick up on that relatively quickly if the owner is starting to check out.
Absolutely. So next one we've got here, Bob, what is the method used for valuing pest control businesses?
Well, the simplest approach, everything, I don't want to get too financial, but really future cash flow and risk are the two components at the end of the day. So the best way to evaluate your business is renewable services, and that is the services that are on a definition of renewable service is a service that you schedule for the customer, and you schedule it in a routine manner several times a year. That's a little loose, but it can be 4 times, it can be 6 times, it can be 3 times. We just need to see that it's being scheduled by you and you're not waiting for the phone to ring to schedule the next service. That's very important. And that's what's going to do the most to add to your multiple on sales. And then the other multiple that we would look at would be EBITDA. But EBITDA is a little bit more confusing because you can do it different ways and you can look at it different ways. But if you're charging the right price, which is a decent price, and you're in the right price realm for the buyer, and you're selling renewable service, the value of your business is going to be maximized.
I will say, Bob, too, I think some of the larger, more sophisticated buyers, especially some of these private equity groups that are coming into the space, are going to focus on the EBITDA and what is that cash flow. Like you said, there's a few different definitions. We have the straight line EBITDA, we have adjusted EBITDA. That's something that we really focus on as well at CETANE, right. Is the financial guys really that help you out, right?
Yep.
But I agree, there's a few different methods and there's a few ways to skin a cat, right?
Yeah, and EBITDA is going to be important because these things are so correlated at the end of the day, because if you're running the business with renewable services charging the right amount, consequently, your EBITDA is going to be higher because those things are all things that make you more profitable. So it's all correlated at the end of the day, that you show me a business where they're charging the right amount and they're doing it in a routine manner, they're just going to be more profitable than someone who charges less and waits for the phone to ring for every service they do. So it will trickle into your EBITDA, and EBITDA becomes a good indicator of kind of a similar behavior by the business.
Yeah, absolutely. Next one we've got here, Bob, suggested that I clean up my balance sheet during the off season. What else should they focus on to get the highest multiple or the most value for their business?
It's really good to be organized when you're going to sell, and that is to understand where your revenue is coming from, because the first thing the buyer is going to want to know is where is your revenue and what is it and how do you charge. So it's going to be important that you understand all those components for the prospective buyers when you market your business. Another thing that I really like to see as a buyer is an organization where I can understand. I would always kind of really like some kind of org chart from the organization, even if it was handwritten on a piece of paper and they gave it to me. I may be being a little too kind, but it would be nice for me to go in there and see a structure that I understand who does what within the organization. So I saw the manager, who reports to whom, and what the overall structure is in the business. And it can be a fluid, all org charts, and I've done a million of them. They change weekly. They have dotted lines and they have all kinds of different components. But at the end of the day, it's really helpful for an outsider to walk in and go, how is this company structured? Who does what, and who does the sales? Who does the inventory? Who does the operations? And an org chart can really help do that relatively easily.
That's great. Yeah, that's really great. Next one we've got here, Bob. What is the mistake that sellers make the most when selling their business, would you say?
The most common mistake I've seen, there's two common mistakes. The one is they wait too long because they just continually wait for that opportune day that the price is going to be worth the most. And they really can't wait to the point that they're no longer invested their effort into the business. So I did walk into several that I did acquire over the years that had clearly waited too long, and the energy and the commitment to the business had vastly diminished. They lost interest in the business. They lacked the energy. It requires leading a business, especially a relatively small business, requires, well, I guess all business, requires a tremendous amount of energy by the owner. And if you've been doing it for 35 or 45 or 25 years, it's going to it gets hard to wake up every day and provide that level of leadership in your business. So at some point, you can kind of put it on autopilot and basically not pay attention to the business the way you were. So it's very important that you don't wait too long, would be the one component. And the second one that I've seen, and I will dwell again on pricing, is to not raise your price in a routine manner, to just keep your price the same. And every year when you have to make that fateful decision of raising price, is to avoid it. And if you avoid it 5 years in a row, you start to get really far behind of a good price increase. So my recommendation is to raise price very often, and you don't have to raise it a lot, but you have to make sure you get used to raising it in a routine manner, because you really have to keep up with your cost, which never go down.
Yeah, I was going to say, Bob, in the last 18 months or so, we've seen inflation crazy high and labor rates continue to go up. If you're not keeping up with that, you're losing that profitability in your company, right?
Yeah, it is, Barrett. It's a great lesson that I would tell people is, the guy that doesn't, or not the guy, the person who doesn't raise their price for a 3-year period will then realize, you know what, I've waited too long, and now I need to raise price by, I don't know, 15% or some pretty high number. So they jump in at 15, and one of their explanation is that I haven't raised price in 3 or 4 years, and I'm getting caught up with this one price increase.
Yeah,
I can tell you that the customer's attention to that excuse or that reasoning, they don't care. They just know that you just raised price by 15, and to them, that's a year ago they were paying 15% less. The fact that you haven't raised their price in 5 years or 3 years doesn't matter to them. So you can't fall into that trap that you're going to not do it as often and you're going to catch up, because when you catch up, it's really going to be far more painful when you do raise price. And I've heard that rationale quite a bit.
great.
It's hard raising price. You almost have to if you have a controller or a CFO or somebody that really advises you on a financial side, I always recommend that you rely on them to help you with price increase. Because the closer you are to the customers and the more you're on that front line dealing with customers on a daily basis, the more you're going to be afraid, or not afraid, the less apt you're going to be to raise price.
Yeah.
So I would always try to make sure that I would have my financial person in the room and say, what do I need to do? And they would say 8%. And I would say, okay, I'm going to do 6, but I hear what you're saying. But at least I heard from financial what they wanted me to do. And I would always advocate for yearly price increases if at all possible.
Yep, that's great. All right, Bob, next question we have here is, how long is the process to sell a business, really?
To sell a business, to do it correctly, is going to take 4 to 5 months from the day that you decide you're going to sell. From the day that you get committed and you say to yourself, we're going to sell the business, you want to give yourself the reason, and you want to give yourself 4 to 5 months, because if you want to get the most for your business, that's how long it's going to take. Because the best way to get the highest value for anything, and you see it in sports, you see it in cars, you see it in virtually any competitive market, is to have more than one buyer. So you're never going to get the most price with one buyer. Now, having said that, I was often one buyer on the other side, but I can tell you that there's none of us that in a competitive market, a true auction market, won't pay more for the same thing. So to make that happen and to get that multiple buyer environment, it's going to take 4 to 5 months to do it correctly.
Yeah, I'd say it's a very involved process too. It seems like you'd think it'd be easy, but there's due diligence that can be difficult and legal work that can be difficult if you're selling real estate, environmental work. So I'd say it's just a lot more involved than let's go sell my house today and put it on the market. There's just a lot of moving pieces as well. So it naturally it takes a little longer as well.
It's a great analogy, Barrett, because I would always say it's kind of like when you move, every box that you now have to open and deal with. And when a guy's buying your business, that box in your office that you haven't opened for 5 years, he's going to want to know what's in that box and what he's dealing with. So all those items that you have basically delayed making decisions on, he's going to want to know all those things. He's going to want to know all your structure and the way you do things in your business.
Absolutely.
Right.
All right. The next question we have here, what are some characteristics that make selling a business hard?
There's 3 of them I can think. I'm going to list them in 1, 2, 3. The first one, which I can say for the 5th time already, is renewable service. If you don't have a high percentage of renewable service and you're doing everything when the phone rings, the value of your business is never going to get that high. That would be the first and probably most important. The second one would be your pricing. Low pricing is like a poison pill when you go to sell a business, because if you're charging half of what I do for your same program or similar program that I'm going to have to integrate, I really can't buy your business at half price. I really can't buy those customers and do them for half of what I'm doing them for and pretend to make any money on it. And I can't go in and double their price the first year, because all they're going to do is go that I'm insane and that they were paying half of that before. So those are the first is programs, the second is price. And the third one is to try to make sure that your revenues are diversified. By that, I mean, if 25% of your revenue is with one client, you're going to have to really understand that increases the risk for your business. It doesn't mean it can't sell, but the buyer is going to be concerned about the nature of having one of his accounts all tied in one basket, being 25%. We like to see no one revenue over 3% of the business would be the gold standard. So if you're doing $1 million, we don't want to see anybody over $30,000 in that whole business. Would be a good example.
Great. These next 2 that I've got, Bob, I think are pretty similar. So we've got, when should I tell my employees, and then will my employees find out?
So we recommend you can't, because to do it right, you really cannot tell your employees until after the deal is done. Now that's going to be hard to do, but at the same time, it's kind of your obligation to sell the business correctly. Now, having said that, depending on your structure, there may be one or a couple key employees that you want to pull into the loop. And that's a good thing to do, as long as you really understand who they are and what they do and how they're gonna help you sell the business. Because if you do that effectively, and I've seen it done really well, where you pull them in and you say, hey guys, here fellas, here's what I decided to do. They will get invested in it. To do that, you need to make sure that that they're people you know you can trust. And typically they are, because they would be in your inner circle. And the second thing is that typically you want to let them know how they're going to be treated through the process. So you want to let them know that because they're now in this group, confidentiality is expected, and that you're going to compensate them at some level for that level of confidentiality at the end of the deal. So I would have something in line, and I would know what that is when you meet with them.
And confidentiality is key in this process. So your advisors will keep it confidential. Any buyers will be held to confidentiality agreements. And unless you let a few key employees in, it really should stay with a tight-knit group.
Yeah, and the other one you asked, Barrett, was does it leak out? And I have found that it really rarely does. And when it does, you need to get ahead of it with your staff. I have had it leak out. I've done many acquisitions, but I was also, as a buyer, I would never wear anything when I was meeting with them, even if we were meeting for lunch 5 miles from their office, and I never went to their office, even at night. But if I was meeting them at lunch, I would never have a company vehicle, and I would never have company clothing on at any given moment that day. In fact, a funny story, I had my managers meet with me one day, and they were coming with clothing, so they had to stop at Walmart and buy new outfits for the luncheon. So I told them they looked like a Walmart brochure when they got there. They weren't real happy. But it was pretty funny. When I saw them show up, they had these Walmart outfits on because they forgot that they had to wear neutral clothing to the meeting. So I thought it was pretty funny. Yeah, I know. I said you could have gone to Kohl's and not Walmart. I would have paid for it. They were pretty happy. They got some outfits at Walmart. And they changed in the parking lot like homeless people, but it was good. So but I was always very aware, and I would always let the seller know, hey, I'm going to show up. I'm not going to be in any clothing. I'm not going to be in any of my company's clothing at the time. And 90% of what I owned at that point had the logo on somewhere on myself. So I was very conscious not to let that happen.
Well, we definitely want you wearing clothes when you're out in public, Bob. So
yeah, a lot of people do. Yes. Thank you.
We've got this one. I think this is can go either way, but how long should a seller stay after closing?
The great question. Most, in my experience, 60 to 90 days is typically about the standard of which they become useful and they're able to help in a transition. After 90 days, they typically feel like they're in the way, and it starts to get a little awkward. So my expectations were that 60 to 90-day period that they were available, and it was on a diminishing level each week they were there. So the first week, I might have needed them 4 days a week, and then it would go to 3 days to 2 days to maybe 1 day a week in the final month, just to check up with them on some routine things. That doesn't mean that I didn't have their cell phone, and my staff wouldn't be going out to a key account and they would check with them on occasion, but that was just being available to answer some questions. But It was typically 3 months on a diminishing curve that by the end of the 3 months, they're kind of calling you on Monday saying, what do you want me to do this week? And you don't even know what to tell them. So, which is normal. And that's, I said, we're trying to make you as irrelevant as we can, as fast as we can. And that appeals to most sellers. They like the term being irrelevant to them, kind of feels good.
Yeah. Now, I think it is case by case, and every owner wants different stuff. And then I'd also say some of the private equity companies are going to want you to roll over some of the equity. And if you own 20%, not only are you going to want to stick around and be a part of that, but they want you to have that ownership and stick around as well. So it's really case by case. I think you're absolutely right. And it really depends on the owner's intention. If this is retirement time, it's probably best to kind of wipe your hands clean and walk away, right? But if this is something you want to participate in upside in the future, I think there's a case that you would stick around too sometimes. So really case by case.
And I have, Barrett, I have had a couple owners stay in certain roles. I always said for that to work, it had to be something A, they were good at, and B, they liked doing. So I did have a guy who I acquired who was a really good salesperson. He was not a great manager of his business. He grew the business, but it was somewhat chaotic when I bought it. but he stayed on for 5 to 10 years and was a very effective sales rep. He was reckless in his salesmanship, but he was also very good at it. So it was a good fit, but that was a unique situation. And I told him that you can't run a business, but you can sell, and that's why your business grew. So that was a good fit, but that was kind of a rare exception.
Yeah.
Where I could find a slot for them to be an asset.
Yep. I like this next one. Do you recommend starting a pest control division organically, or would you advise on an acquisition to get you in the game?
So my normal answer, I do work with people and help them get involved in pest control from scratch. And normally for that size client, I recommend we start with something before we consider an acquisition. Primarily because when you're doing a small acquisition, you're not going to get a whole lot of leadership talent that you can run a business with. So you're going to have to develop some infrastructure before you start acquiring small companies. Now, the exception to that would be if you bought somebody big enough that they had infrastructure, so that they had an owner and they had 2 or 3 managers that were capable of running the business. So you have to get to a size where the owner is not the main, it's not as critical in the business, and you're able to buy them and call that your startup. But I would think that at a minimum size, 3 to 5 million, you have to probably be that big until you're going to acquire that level of talent. But having said that, unless you're going to jump in at that size, you're not going to buy a $500,000 pest business and get leadership, because you're going to get an owner that leaves when you buy the business. And the owner at a $500 or even $1 million business is basically still the general manager of the business. So they're going to leave, and then you're going to get stuck with a business with no one to run it, which is total chaos.
So I think this one really goes off that one well, is what are some do's and don'ts when starting a pest control business?
The do's and don'ts are that and I've done this, and I actually have a client right now in New York State that has started a business, and they've done a really good job, is that there's two people you need to run the business, and they can be one if you're lucky enough to find them. The 2 components you need the technical side, that you know what you're doing from a pest control entomology perspective. So you need what I'll call the entomologist, which is a loose term because the level of qualification can vary depending on what kind of work you're going to do. But you need the entomologist, and then you need the person that runs and operates the business side of the business. And they can be 2 people, but they rarely are at that size. So my standard recommendation would be that you really need a person that knows the entomology side, knows how to kill bugs, knows how to do it legally and professionally. And then you need a person in the business side that knows to grow renewable service and focuses on all the business components of the business. So those are the 2 characteristics you need. And to put those in one position is almost impossible at that size. They're out there, but it's pretty hard.
Any big don'ts or no-nos?
Don't hire a guy or a girl, I keep saying, don't hire a person who's done pest control and say, you're going to be my pest control person, and then leave them alone and just assume that they know how to grow a business, because they may have done pest control for 15 years for a company that wasn't that well run, and then you hire them because they really know bugs and they know how to do pest control, and now you have them running your business. You hire them and then you neglect them because you go right back to what you were doing, and they never really understand the way to grow a profitable business. So 5 years down the road, they might only have a third of their business in renewable revenue. They might not be selling it the right way. They might be making bad pricing decisions. So you need to make sure that you continue to have that business presence. For whoever you hire, you need to make sure you understand where you need to support them. And it's primarily going to be on the business side, because you're probably going to get the entomology side, but the business side is going to be real important.
Great. Bob, we just hit past 30 minutes. So for the sake of time, I know we told everyone this would be a 30-minute webinar. We still have quite a few questions, so we're going to stick around. But if you need to check out, we did say this would be 30 minutes, so please feel free to leave at this time.
We like questions, Barrett, too. If you want to throw any in that Q&A, even about like baseball playoffs, I'm all in. All right.
Yeah. So the inception of this webinar was really, we would do a presentation and the best action came from the Q&A time. So we thought, why not just have an open-ended Q&A? And I've really liked how it's gone so far. So we can still hit a few more though here, Bob, while we got some time.
All right.
I liked this one as well. As a seller, do I need an attorney?
The short answer is you do. If you're in a seller, you should already have an attorney is my first answer. You don't want to try to find an attorney at the last minute would be the worst case scenario. So yes, you're going to need an attorney. You're going to need somebody representing you on a legal capacity. And ideally, it's somebody that you've worked with, that you like to work with, and that understands you and provides the level of service you want. When you're hiring an attorney, they work for you. You don't work for them. So when you meet with them and you interview them, you need to make sure that they're answering the information in a manner that you understand. So when they answer a question and you don't know what they just said, you either need to say, stop, explain that again, because I have no idea what you just said, or you need to find another attorney, because it's their job to make you understand. So a lot of people are they're a little bit afraid of their attorney and never really understand it, but it's incumbent upon you with your attorney and any CPA or any accountant you hire that you understand what they say and how to interpret it correctly.
Great. We've got this one. I like this one. It's a little different spin on it, but what are some of the most important elements? Or excuse me, I think we've already answered that. Is all revenue created equal? And the question more is on how do acquirers view certain revenue streams as far as bed bug, termite, all the different, we've hit on renewable versus non-renewable, Bob, but how about different services? And
great question. So obviously we're going to talk about the non-renewable component like termite work, which is typically not considered renewable because it has to have termites, you treat it, and usually it's over. There is a yearly, most of us in the Northeast anyway, have a yearly termite renewal that we sell, which does turn into a pretty nice annuity and a renewable. But the majority of the revenue comes from the termite work. And if you can show consistent revenue on termite and that every year you're doing $250,000, 300,000, 350,000 of termite, it's going to have more value than it would be normally with just the fact that it's not renewable, because you're showing that you have a process in place that's going to grow that revenue on a consistent basis. Because termite work is good, but you need to see it on a routine. If you're showing it in a routine manner, it's not going to be worth as much as renewable, but it's going to be worth quite a bit because you're showing that you're repeating it from year to year. Termite would be a great example.
Yeah, great. So will higher interest rates reduce private equity interest in pest control companies?
They really haven't, and one of the reasons is that the pest control and other similar services have right now are really important to investors because they really like the necessary service component. And I would say that as interest rates go up, their desire to take risk from an investor standpoint is going to go down. So the fact that they're buying a business that does something that the people need on a day-to-day basis. They're not selling $6 coffee. They're not selling things that people might give up in a really bad economy. So the more stable you can show your revenue, the interest rates won't have as much of an impact on the buyers. And pest control meets that definition really well. It's very stable. It goes from year to year. Nothing's recession proof. That would be a bad word, but it's relatively recession resistant compared to other businesses that I was running.
Yeah. They were really looking for recurring sticky revenue. And I think that renewable pest control business is exactly what they want to see. Interest rates are coming back down a little bit. I would say maybe we still see the appetite in the industry. You might see multiples ebb and flow. We're not always going to go up on multiples. They will ebb and flow as interest and various financial factors impact the valuations. So I'd say maybe multiples come down a little, but we've seen it as a very attractive and sought after industry.
Cool.
So Bob, maybe let's answer one more and then we can kind of close out. Will my employees need to sign non-competes with the new buyer?
Great question. Very, very big question that employees will ask the day that you come in and said, we just bought your company, and they're all standing there. They had no idea this day was coming. It was probably their first unannounced staff meeting they've had in their career. And now you're standing there and they're going to say, do I need to sign a non-compete? And we were big on non-competes are almost unenforceable in many states unless you compensate heavily for them. They're hard to enforce and they're not fair because we all have a right to work. Non-solicitation is typically what we would do. And what I think most companies are doing now, we're okay if you go work elsewhere. We just don't want you stealing our customer list when you go. So non-solicitation is reasonable, it's enforceable, and it's pretty much what the standard expectation is going to be. Non-competes, again, unless I'm going to give you a lot of money because I just bought your business, there's a non-compete that's going to stick. But for me to go into a new company and expect you to sign a non-compete when you've been there for 2 years and now you can't work anywhere else is unreasonable and rarely does it happen.
Great. All right, well, with that, I think we'll wrap up, Bob. Once again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. It's been great fielding as many questions as we could. I think we had quite a few that we actually didn't get to, but for the sake of time, we want to wrap up now. If you have any more questions, you can find our information and reach out to us directly at cetane.com. And as we will be posting this recording if you'd like to follow up on anything that we said during the webinar. So thanks everyone so much for joining, and we'll hopefully see you all soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Barrett. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Bob.
All right.